My fellow Americans, I'm back with you. I'm going to tell you a very, very, very interesting, timely story. It's a story of Masada. Most Christians and Jews know it. I think it's a biblical story, but it's really a historical story. It's very significant. And why is it significant? For a lot of reasons. But the main ones that I'm going to consider is that because during that time, which was the time of Christ, a little bit after Masada was destroyed, probably around 70 or 71 AD. But the Roman Empire controlled that area, and the Roman Empire was almost exactly like Obama's empire right now. Very, very similar to it. You know, it had an emperor, which, you know, analogous to Obama, or a president, and it had a form of a Congress that made the laws and carried it out. And it even was divided into two bodies, and it had didn't have slavery directly. It had indirect slavery. You know, servitude is what it was. You know, you had to work off your time with this person, and you could become free. By the way, and that's that's how we're becoming too. But it had all the other same elements. You know, it was fascist. It was controlled by them. There was just the two-class people. There were the citizens, and there were the elite. Just many analogies. And I'm not going to get into all the details. You can read about it yourself. But when you read about it, make sure you read accurate information from as close to the original source as possible. And Wikipedia is not bad, but here's an example how Wikipedia misses it. And I took the most recent information on Masada, and that's where I'm going to tell you the story from. And what they do is they try to go back to the original source. In some of my other videos, I told you the only way to find out really what happens in history is go to the original sources, as close to the original sources as possible. Of course, you know, you can't go back, you know, 2,000, 4,000 years. They didn't have tapes back then and videos, of course, so you go back to the writers that wrote back then, but you still investigate what they're all about. I studied a great deal in the name of a guy named Josephus. He was a Jew, which most of the writers and readers were Jews, by the way, because they were well educated. They usually could read and write several languages. And he was employed by the Roman Empire. So remember that. By the way, I want to say something to all you Christians. Most of you Christians are listening right now. I've been to many churches, probably hundreds of different churches in my evolution myself. And I heard many priests and preachers say that there was no historical evidence of Christ. Well, I got news for you. It's very small, but Josephus wrote, and he lived during the time of Christ, and he wrote about Christ. There's only 3 sentences. It's 1 paragraph. But he said there was a man named Yeshua HaMashiach who came and claimed that he was the Son of God, and he was executed. There's about 4 sentences on him. And that's historical evidence, because Josephus unquestionably lived during that time, and he was supposedly like the historian for the state. Now, so realize he was biased. So Wikipedia quotes from him, but they keep saying that according to his quotes. And so as I tell you the story, realize that, okay? I'm going to show you pictures while I tell you the story, but I'm just preempting it with this. So listen carefully. It really relates today, and it really relates to tomorrow, and of course it relates to the past too. Okay, here we go. The story goes that there were a group of Jews during this time. They were called Sakariya, I believe, okay? And they were supposed to be kind of like Orthodox Jews, and they were called rebels. They supposedly killed off Romans and Greeks. I don't think they did. Their prime directive in life was the preservation of life, all life, by the way. And but they were really stricken by the destruction of the temple and temple walls. And so they decided, there was 953 of them. They went off to this place that you're seeing called Masada. It looks like kind of a mountaintop cut off. And they say, Josephus says that they took it from the Greeks that were there. I don't think so. I think the Greeks had abandoned it. But of course, you know, Josephus was writing for the state. And they lived there for years, and the Greek and Roman Empire, of course, which was combined at the time, told them to come down, and they wanted to enslave them, because they were enslaving Jews, by the way. But Jews could practice their own religion. Now, they were there primarily because they didn't like the city-state government that Rome represented. It was a lot of tyranny and executions, and just like today, and a lot of deception. Just some of the walls that they made of marble, the beautiful, beautiful things. And they just lived there, and they wanted to live there in peace. Now, they were able to sustain themselves because they had a system of cisterns with water and everything, and those type of things to sustain themselves, and they were very happy. But the Romans kept trying to come after them, and they couldn't. Eventually, this is what they built. By the way, you can see it. It's a huge rampart. That's how they finally came up there and got them. Now, here's the real significant thing. Supposedly, according to Josephus, the Romans came up, and as they got close, the Jewish leaders in Masada decided to poison everybody. Kind of sounds like Jonestown or something. But this is my land, which shows you an analogy of it. The facts are that they probably didn't kill themselves at all. And here's why. First of all, they didn't believe. They thought it was a sin to commit suicide, and preservation of life was extremely strong among these. Of course, it's the same way in Judaism now. Judaism is fundamental directive is the preservation of life. I mean, that's as old as the religion is. Now, here's some of the strong evidence that they didn't kill themselves. The Romans came in there and just annihilated them. One is, of course, they didn't commit suicide. One is that Josephus said they left their food available. They didn't burn their food. They burned everything, by the way, before they killed each other. They took lots and gave poison. One killed another until the last man, and then the last man killed himself. So they really didn't. They of course didn't do this. They fought to the last man, as well, last man and last woman. But the evidence shows archaeologically that they burned their food stuff before the Romans got there. And Josephus says they didn't. And they can archaeologically date these things, and the food stuff was burned at the time of the siege, which I think was around 73 AD. Okay. Again, see the deceptiveness and how they work, and they could take these people and just annihilate them, and they just wanted to live in peace in an area that they were not, obscurated by the government. There's a lot of people who live out here where I am, by the way, that feel the same way. They just can't stand this government. They can't stand communism and Machiavellian communism. So they live out here and try to live in peace. And they don't bother anybody, by the way. Okay, so here's the story that's a very deceptive story, just like what you hear often in the news, because you don't hear the whole truth. And here's this reality of how it's distorted. So I hope you start seeing the lessons here. There's been movies made on Masada, by the way, and I think in 1981 or something. I never saw the movie because I didn't want to be disappointed because I knew the truth of it. Now, when I was a young man and I read and studied these things in Hebrew, the Hebrew version, as much as I was telling you, is exactly that. These people wanted peace, comfort. They could not. It was not religious persecution now. They just wanted to be away from the Roman Empire, which is very, very, very corrupt. By the way, they called their things back then wars, but they were very much like police actions too. And they disagreed with that. They were a bunch of Jewish, good people, Hebrews that wanted to live a peaceful life by themselves. And of course, communist government, much as the Greek and Roman Empire was, could not accept this. And then they made it a deceptive story in how they killed them, that they committed suicide. Not at all. It's almost impossible for them to do that. So go do a little research on this and then correlate it to your own lives and what you hear in the news and what's happening right now. Thanks.